Jason Stallworth here with Metal Mastermind. Today I'm going to give you 10 methods you can use to come up with some killer new metal riffs. This is perfect if you have one of those riffs that's just kind of stale. You don't want to quite throw it away, but maybe it just sounds too much like the other stuff you've already written. Well, use these 10 methods. You're going to come up with some cool stuff. Now, you want to hang around till the entire video because the methods that we implement here, they're going to get a little bit more obscure as we go on. So with that said, let's jump right in. We're going to start out with what I'm calling your core riff. And this could be any riff. Maybe you wrote it 2 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Maybe you wrote it this morning or today before you watch this video here. But just take any riff that you're working on. It doesn't even have to be a quote-unquote complete riff. It doesn't matter. And I want you to assess the things that are happening with that riff. That's important because we're going to be applying 9 more concepts to change this riff around and make it sound different and just bring it to life. So what I'm doing here, I'm playing on a 7-string guitar. I'm in B standard tuning, and of course I'm going for that lowest note possible there with that B power chord. I've got some other power chords I'm playing here as well along with that. I believe we've got a D and a C. Now I'm also throwing in some single notes, and I am just playing downstrokes. So just assess your riff, think about what you're doing, and now we're going to move on and make one simple change to that same riff. All we did here was we just took the core riff and played it in a different octave, a higher octave in this case here, because my core riff, well, I'm playing the lowest notes possible. So I'm going to go an octave higher, just figure out where that is. And in this case, I'm going from the heavy B and the E strings there. I'm going to play that same riff on the E and the A strings. Again, I'm on a 7-string guitar here. Now, you saw me play that, and I'm going to play that again for you real quick. You saw me play that in 2 different places. Now, I want you to hear the difference because this is kind of like a 2.5 here. So listen to it when I play it on the E and A strings. I also played it in that same octave, okay, and still is just 1 octave higher than the original core riff. I also tried that on the A and the D strings. And again, just listen to the slight tonal difference in the two. I got a little bit more bite with those higher strings, the A and the D strings, as opposed to playing that on the E and the A strings. There's no right or wrong way here, but I just want you to be aware of things like this as you're writing, because one might fit the song better than the other. That being said, let's move on to number 3. Now that may have sounded very similar to playing the riff in a higher octave, and basically it's kind of the same concept. What we're doing though, we're not necessarily playing the higher octave, we are playing it in a completely different key than what you wrote the original core riff in. And what I want you to do is just pick any place on the fretboard. Again, it doesn't have to be the same key, aka a higher octave or lower octave, but just pick a different spot on the fretboard and just play it in a different key. Now remember, we assessed our riff in the beginning. We assessed the core riff. and one of the assessments that we made was the riff was being played with only downstrokes. So what I want you to think about doing is just changing the picking technique or even the picking pattern a little bit. In this case, I threw in a little bit of alternate picking, what I like to call a gallop, that 1, 2, 3, which is one of my personal favorite techniques when it comes to playing metal guitar. But I just threw that in a couple of different spots, and that sort of changed the feel of the riff. This is another very simple and really cool change that you can make to your riff. So remember, assessing the core riff, I assessed that we were just playing power chords. There were power chords involved with the riff. Now, what we did here is we changed the way we're playing some of those power chords. Now, to do that, I also changed the riff around a little bit as well. But what I'm doing is just playing a variation of a power chord by simply changing the second note of the power chord. Your normal power chord is just the root note, and then the second note that's played is called your fifth note. So again, I just changed around that fifth note. Another simple thing you can do is change the tempo. Change how fast or how slow you play this riff. And this is a really cool practice, especially if you feel like your riffs are just kind of stale and everything's sounding the same. Sometimes we may have a tendency to play in the same or similar like pocket of tempos, if you will, because that's just what we're used to playing and it's kind of what's naturally coming out. Well, I challenge you to either maybe speed it up a little bit. That's what we're kind of inclined to do a lot of times. You can also back it down and slow it down a bit as well, like you heard. So again, a very simple change that you can make to a stale riff to kind of bring it to life. Another thing you can do is add more notes to the riff. And I would just say start out by adding 1 or 2 more notes. Just see where you can fit those notes in. It might be just enough to be like, okay, that's what I was looking for. That's what I was hearing in my head. Just adding that 1 or maybe 2 more notes. So just feel free to add more notes to that riff. So let's hear the difference between the core riff and then what we just played. Again, I think I just added 1 simple note, but you can hear how it sort of changed the feel of the riff. In contrast to what we just did, you can also take away some notes and simplify the riff. As metal guitar players, many of us, we want to play the faster stuff because it's more challenging, and hey, that's understandable, but there might be some riffs that just sound better when you simplify them a little bit. It may serve the song better in certain parts of the song. So this is something to think about. If you feel like, okay, well, I've got all these notes here, well, try taking some notes away, or try taking all of the single note riffs away like we did in this case here. We just stuck with the main power chords and just kind of chugged away on those few power chords there. That might serve the song well if it's a part where you want to say, let's let the vocals be highlighted more, or maybe there's another instrument, maybe a lead, maybe there's a little bass run or something like that that you want to highlight within that song. So that might be a time where you simplify that riff and just pull things back a little bit on the guitar. I want you to think about subgenres for a second here. And I don't necessarily want you to label your riff as anything, but think about the techniques, the sound, the character, the feel to the riff if you were to play this subgenre versus that subgenre. And I want you to play around with all of them. Not necessarily all subgenres of metal, because that's just like an endless list of subgenres now as they keep growing. But just think of the subgenres that you like, that are most dear to your heart, and just try implementing the techniques that you're hearing in your head with those subgenres of music. Try implementing those techniques to your riff, and you're going to come up with some different styles of that same core riff that you wrote. The final concept I want you to think about is lyric placement and vocal melodies when you're writing your riffs. So we went back to the core riff. We played that. What I did when the vocals came in was I simplified the riff. Remember, we talked about this earlier, simplifying the riff. There might be a time and place for that in your song. So I just let those power chords ring out, while the vocals, I wanted those to be highlighted. And it's not that you can't implement vocals with more complex and more moving riffs. You certainly can. But again, we just want to give you some things to think about as you're writing this riff. What is the purpose of this riff in this part of the song? We've got another video going through the entire songwriting process, adding other elements into it, and just kind of giving you like a template to go by that'll make the process a lot smoother. We'll put that video up there for you to check out. Now, if you're ready to dive headfirst into metal songwriting, we actually have a course called Metal Songwriters Forge. I'll throw something up there for you to check that out. There will be a link for that in the description as well. So hope you enjoyed this video. As always, create your own sound.